So good morning, everybody.
We just read.
It's much smaller now.
My watch is to military time, so I'm always ahead. Am I on target or later?
6 after.
Just after.
I have 6
From
after.
another
Probably
military
2
guy.
minutes late early.
Thanks, Roger. Hey, Brad, could you pull that door closed?
What?
Right. I was working on my master's of divinity in Cambridge and Andover. For some reason, students were quite known to be late, and I don't like being late. Now, Julie, this is not what this is about, but if anybody's having marital challenges, you can just know sometimes you marry your opposite. We're not. But if you're volunteering this information, we know which one you are. So I like to be on time, and I was always annoyed with the students that came in late to a class. I felt robbed in a sense. I mean, I really wasn't paying for it, somebody else was, but my sense was, how dare you come in and be disruptive, until I got to Dr. Pazmino, who decided to lock the door at the, and I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. So at the appointed hour of the class, the door's locked, and he starts, and there's a... Now, I would not be that brave, so Dr. Pazmino goes to the door, sticks his head out, and says, "Can I help you?" And they said, "I'm enrolled for this class." "Not today." And closed the door. And I thought,
Wow.
that was my best moment ever in my education. He was teaching the essence of administration, and what a great thing to... it lacked graciousness, but I felt vindicated. That's not what this is about. So thank you for... I'm so humbled just to have this time this morning, that it's to be meaningful, and it's really to be about a dialogue. It's not about programming per se. I think that you should feel hungry or not satisfied if I said I'm going to talk about the state of grace and say, let's talk about programming, as if the programming became the vehicle for leading people to a greater expansive understanding for grace. Does that make sense? In the sense, programs come and go. There's something else that is vital, and that's what I want to point to. And talk about quite transparently, with transparency, about what I believe to be true about my own calling as priest with you, as rector. Does all that make sense? Probably not.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, if I stood up here and talked about programming, you should... Maybe you think, well, you're wasting my time. And there's lots of... That's not to diminish the fact that there's great programming going on. I mean, by essence of calling it a program, it's going to be great, right? We're not going to say, well, that's a bad program. So I'm just saying that is a pointer. I want to talk about the thing for which programming points to. Fair enough? And I'm so appreciative of your graciousness for all the clergy here. I mean that sincerely. We are humbled by your love to have us here. I mean that. A week ago, that when you say the state of grace, it invites people that have a particular interest that is fulfilled or isn't fulfilled to say something, right? And when the rector is going to do it, it really invites an energetic sense, and mostly it isn't, "Father Chris, I'm just so excited, let me tell you what you're doing right." That does happen. That's not the absence of it. Both, for me, spiritually, are held on the same plane, because programming points to something. I'm not being vague. I hope it's all clear when we finish. And if it's not, well. Do we need to open windows?
Yes.
Let's, because God knows I don't want to fight that too. I'm going to say about a week ago, somebody when they, that's a program, window opening, a few weeks ago, a week ago, when somebody realized that I was speaking about the state of grace, assuming that I was going to talk about programming, I came to a realization through this conversation. They said, are you going to tell them everything's great? Yeah. And I could tell by my answer of saying everything is great, that there was some level of disappointment and a belief that I was not appropriately transparent around growth in the parish. And I thought, you know, it's fair to be transparent. The growth is difficult. And at times I wonder that in growth moments in the life of the parish, is it fair for me, because what I do, what I've learned early on, can I use your glass of water? I won't drink from it. I learned early on spiritually, well not early on, later on in life, I through a lot of suffering, that everything that I was concerned about, I would see it in a container. And I would think the best way for me to deal with it is to pick it up. And I couldn't figure out that things that I put in here, like, you're a bad priest, I didn't like the sermon, how dare you, you missed, or Father Jeffrey's sermon really spoke to me last week when Mary and Martha said, if only. You know, I put that in there, if only. And I thought the best way to manage it was to pick it up. And I'd walk around with it, and I'm like, this is heavy. And it got heavier the longer I carried it. It would for you too. This half glass, is it half full or half empty? It would still get weighty if you carried it. Mary Ann actually, a week ago, talked about the perspective. It would still get heavy. Until finally a spiritual guru said, why are you carrying it? Because it's there. Because my ego says that I can manage it. And my guru said, put it down. And I went, ooh, that's easier. And then something would happen. And I'd go. And it would get heavier again. And I'd put it down. Does this speak to anybody's life? And then I'd do this a series of here. I won't do it again. I'm not drinking that water. And eventually, I got to a place spiritually where I no longer had a desire to pick it up. That means that there would be certain things that would go on, and I just, even if I wanted to pick it up, I couldn't. Even when people would come and entice me saying, you're not good unless you pick it up. How dare you? You're an imposter. And I just say, maybe, but I'm not, I can't. There's nothing spiritually. You get to a place where you just can't. The dialogue between my role in life with you as priest is it fair for you? Because some things I just don't pick up. To use a silly example, this is silly. Father Chris, where's the candlestick go? I don't know.
I'll tell you where you put it.
Now, I'm speaking metaphorically.
Yes.
Really, I am. And I'd say, I don't know. Where do you want it to go? Well, you should know. Temptation, temptation, temptation. Well, where has it gone before? Over there. Well, put it over there. You know, and in parish life, that's many times I come across that way of, gosh, I really don't know. I don't have an investment in that. But I have an investment in the idea of that person engaging it because it's pointing to something. Is all this making sense? Okay. So when I was listening, doing deep listening, is God calling me to come to Grace Church Hinsdale? Like many things in my life, it doesn't come with a sense of confidence. The bishop, a week ago to the deans, shared before he got ordained, he had a an existential crisis, wondering whether or not he should be ordained or not. And he told this wonderful story. And at lunch after, I said, Bishop, I have that existential crisis every morning. Whether or not I should be doing what I'm doing as priest. And when I get around other priests, I feel incompetent around my own sense of my calling. And it used to bother me until I realized that was the posture that led me deeper into a sacred listening. Because if I had a lot of confidence around it, I would stop listening. Does that make sense? So coming here, I was engaged in sacred listening. And from a real transparent level, it was a scary proposition for me. Many of you have lived this. Randy, you could give this talk. The fact that your rector of 10 years, I'm going to say, Father George, at one point in the tenure, it had tumultuous pieces to it. Amen, brother? Randy lived it in an intimate way as warden, and others have. I mean, it's okay to be transparent. This is not a commentary on him or you. It's about an appropriate vulnerability. And that's an important piece. And then so we, clergy, we say, well, okay, well, maybe the interim, it was a better period. And that was Father Dunn. And we're like, okay, when does it start getting better? When? And is this a place for me? And clergy typically want the sure thing. And I preach about vulnerability today. Vulnerability is about showing up when you don't know the outcome. And I didn't know the outcome. And I have to tell you, I was appropriately afraid because I just didn't know. And at that point, one of my spiritual directors pointed me towards Star Wars. Much to the chagrin of my family, I'm not a Star Wars follower. I do personally know the ranger for the first Star Wars movie. They wanted to shoot a low-budget movie in the desert, and everyone was laughing about it. Well, that was Star Wars 1. Who's laughing now? My spiritual director said in this time of deep listening, and this is what I offer to you as a foundational point for each of us. This is from Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Do we have anybody like Star Wars here?
Yeah.
It's more of our generation.
Well, it keeps going. And I'm like, when's this thing going to end? And my family, they love it. And I'm like, what? Huh? And I don't get it. I mean, it's a commentary on my something. I don't know what it is. Luke says this. There's something not right here. I feel cold. Death. Yoda points to a cave opening beneath a large tree. That place is strong with the dark side of the Force. The domain of evil it is. In it you must go. And my daughter was really disappointed because we do a lot of spiritual talks with each other, and I was reading this to her, and she said, Dad, that's so disappointing. And I said, why? It's so powerful. She says, because you didn't use the voice of Yoda. Luke said, what's in there? And here's the point. Only what you take. That is a spiritual principle for each of us. Now for Luke, what did he take? He took a weapon. And what did he find? Darth Vader. And Darth Vader was himself. I mean, this is like Jungian. I mean, this is some deep stuff here that's going on. So I said, when I go to grace, what do I want to take with me? recognizing that darkness is not about darkness in the sense that we want to think, but darkness has the great potential. Like the 2:45 this morning, I took a walk outside, and I was looking up, and what is dark really isn't dark. It's a perception, just like Luke had when he went into to the cave, about what is dark. It's about potential. And what would I take coming here as your rector? What would I bring into it? And what would I leave out? Well, I decided that I would bring love, humility, and the ever-prevailing posture of gratitude continually. Guess what I found? Love, humility, and the ever-prevailing posture of gratitude. And I'm so glad to be here. The challenge with that is that some people think that I'm not authentic. And I want to give voice to that. Because there's a particular pull that's felt at times that not everybody is ready to consider what it is they're bringing. It is fair to say that it's not without challenge. But I see that challenge as an opportunity for me every day to surrender. I was going to pick up that glass again. No, I'm kidding. It is definitely half empty now. No, I'm kidding. I was kidding. And to continually surrender. I was aware that Father George had some problems, whatever they were. It's not. I mean, the only thing relevant about Father George's problems are the things that you hold on to, right? That's what makes it relevant. We were talking about another clergy person. The only thing that makes relevant the destruction that this clergy person we were talking about makes it relevant is what we hold on to makes it relevant. Does that make sense? We empower things. This goes back to this Star Wars thing right here. Are you all in your seats now? I mean, so I had some sense of awareness that we're not without challenges. I came in January, February, and by September, October, I was asked to resign by several people in the parish. Over a famous, no, that's okay, let's not be shocked. Let's just be transparent to say it's not without challenge. Matter of fact, we talked at the end of that day. I don't know if you remember. And I thought, well, that was a short career. And then I remembered what many people brought in the relationship with clergy was an adversarial posture. Not giving commentary on clergy, good, bad, that's not relevant. It was the posture of what you bring. Remember, what do you bring? And I thought, well, okay. And it was over the famous thing, we call it the Dunning letter. A letter went out helping people understand their financial responsibilities to the parish around their quarterly statement. I got it. I was behind. I was appreciative. I thought, oh, thanks for the reminder. I need to get caught up. Other people thought, how dare you? And I said, well, that's pretty reactive. And at times, the parish can get into a reactive posture because that's what is brought. And yet, the clergy don't pick it up. Because it's good for you that we don't pick it up. But I just want you to know we have an awareness of it. When Father Jeffrey was called, I distinguished myself by going a little bit longer than he did before his resignation was asked for. But it wasn't long until several people said, if you don't get rid of him, I'm leaving. And I will not pledge. And I said, have a nice day.
To Jeffrey?
No, he's here. Father Bob preached a sermon on racism. It was challenging at points because he said we're all racist, which is true. Based on the whole dynamic of diversity, that was true. One person didn't particularly like it and wrote an official letter to vestry asking for his resignation, for which that person was censured and not allowed to receive the sacrament until they repent. So we take it seriously, but we don't pick it up. We're not reactive around it. And so the point is that there is reactiveness many times spiritually because of what people bring into it. Now, it's not. It's just what it is. But I don't want the clergy's, and I say to people, look, it's a fact that Jeffrey, Bob, and Chris are different. You all know that, right? Isn't that wonderful? It is also a fact that Jeffrey, Bob, and Chris can drive each other crazy. It's a fact. But isn't that a great thing? And what's even more true is that while we may not meet a modality of excellence, because in case you haven't figured it out, we're in a community that's not just A personality, not just double A personality, it's triple A personality of an expectation of excellence, and you don't have vulnerability and you don't make mistakes. But you got the wrong three clergy, you know. And I would say, isn't it great that you have three priests that love each other? That's of benefit to you today and for the history of Grace Church, because of our commitment to love each other and not pick up. Our clergy here, we don't say, I would never say to Jeffrey, boy, that was a bad sermon. Nor they better not ever say it to me. No, I'm kidding. But yet, a real respect to love each other around the task of what we do. I say this to say that the clergy here choose not to pick things up that aren't productive spiritually in the life of the parish. But I will tell you, every Sunday, I get something that somebody wants to say, I want you to pick this up and carry it in such a way that you make me feel better. And I don't say this to them because it would hurt them. They might not be ready, but what I want to say is, my calling is not to make you feel better. My calling is to live in such a way that you take a step towards greater awareness towards love, humility, and gratitude. So, and I want you to know too, while there's great programming that goes on, this is the other piece, is that while we're learning and growing spiritually, through greater levels of transparency and vulnerability, which are vital, it's not Program X. Program X is a vehicle that you would show up to say, I want to grow. It could be Program Z. Sometimes people say, well, the program doesn't speak to me. I'm like, okay, that has some relevance. It's not the key relevance. The key relevance is around vulnerability. You'll hear it again at 10. Vulnerability is showing up when you don't know the outcome. You can't get one place. You can't. We were talking about inconvenience before we started. There is the consumer mentality that's strong in this community, not just Grace Church, the entire community, that because of my economic whatever, I should have less inconvenience. Tell me if I'm wrong. I see that a lot. And it gets stronger around country clubs. I'm not a member, but I've been guest, and there's a sense of, my food was 3 minutes late. I'm thinking, I'm just happy the food showed up. You know? And so it breeds a certain sense of entitlement around not feeling inconvenient that sometimes leaks over into the life of the church. The challenge is, you can't grow spiritually unless you're inconvenienced. It's a part of the formula. You have to feel the density and weight of humanity around your life, because at that point, inconvenience is about your ego. The only reason you feel inconvenient is because an egoic impulse said it shouldn't be that way. I'm amazed when I hang around some of my Buddhist mentors. It's like, wow, doesn't that upset you? What? Didn't you see that? See what? Oh, come on, you saw that. I didn't see it. you know, there's a famous line where two monks were traveling on a pathway, and there was a puddle of water, and a young lady in a dress that a nice dress and heels, and you know, couldn't figure out how to get across. One of the monks said, "I'll help you," and picked her up. And for this particular brand of monks, that's a no-no. And so the monk picked her up, walked through the water, set her down, and they both kept walking. Have you heard this story before? Well, the monk that didn't pick her up was really disturbed by this, right? And said, you know, it just festered the entire journey. And said finally to the brother that picked her up and carried her across. He said, "How could you do that? It's been bothering me for hours." And he said, "My friend, what bothers you for hours took me 2 seconds." It goes into that. What will you bring into the cave? On the other hand, there's this too. So I just want you to know I have a keen awareness for life here at Grace. The clergy do. I don't want, my desire is the fact that I don't pick it up for you to assume I don't care, or I'm not aware, or I'm just so aloof that that's not the case. I'm intimately connected, but I'm intimately aware of what's important spiritually for what we pick up to grow. And it isn't a program. That's the point. Now, is that okay to say? I mean, I don't want it to be shocking. I want you to say, okay, there's a certain transparency there that's important. I will tell you, on the other hand, Grace Church has a tremendous reputation programming-wise. I sat around with the deans, and in the diocese, you're the leader. Now, you may not have the biggest budget, but you're a front runner and a leader for where you've come from. And that isn't to say don't celebrate that. You should. But don't celebrate it from an egoic position. Celebrate it from an empty position. You've gone from about $600,000 operating budget to a $1.3 million operating budget in 3 years. Are you aware of that? There is not a church in this country that's done that you've done. In fact, I get calls now, how do you do that? There's no programming formula for it. It's about showing up. It's about everybody showing up and not being concerned about the outcome. You see, it's different if you say, I'm going to show up, or I'm going to pledge, but by God, this better be what I get for it. Well, that didn't work at all. Matter of fact, we got a pledge card this week. I don't know if you received it. Somebody wrote on it, I'm not giving because of somebody on staff, I'll just say the rector, and I'm giving my money someplace else. Okay. I mean, you know, but see, that's that whole sense of, that strange sense of what that particular person brought to it. And the clergy, we don't really spend a lot of time. And somebody said, well, you should call that person. That wasn't my thought, you know, because there's a problem. I can see that. Well, you need to fix it. Oh, you got the wrong rector. You know, and see, that's that whole pick that back up again, because I don't. Now, that doesn't mean that pastoral care is not important. It is. And being present with people, but not present around those kind of manipulations, because that's about something else. Does that make sense too? So the good news is, in terms of programming, you're knocking it out of the park. And it's phenomenal. People always want to talk about, Roger's on council, and Roger, just, if it's, we didn't plan this, but, so they don't think this is just the rector and it's pledge season making them feel good. Roger has exposure to the entire diocese because he sits, we're honored that you sit on council, but if you could for a second.
I'd love to. In fact, I talk about it frequently. One of the things we did in the beginning is to tell what church we belong to and a little bit about the church. There are about 20 people that are on this group, and it's amazing the respect that your rector has in this entire diocese. And we talked about growth and how we've grown and the reasons why we've grown. Now, some has been because of transfer, but in the most part, we are at the top of the list. And I keep saying it's because of that gentleman right there. and everybody in that group.
I picked on you, Roger. I knew you were my guy.
Well, I can't tell you anything else because that's what it's been. It's a great experience, and I thank you for that.
Well, and I say this, that you could take great clergy and you could take them to a parish that brings other things into the cave and nothing's going to happen. Matter of fact, devastating things are going to happen. Emmanuel LaGrange just terminated after 1 year a priest. Great priest. And, you know, he couldn't navigate his way out of it. So, consequently, I want you to know this, for your next rector, you can call a bad rector, and as long as you're focused on what you carry and bring into the cave, you're going to be a great parish. People say, oh, that's not true. No, that is absolutely true. Because it's not predicated on clergy. Now, we play a role. I come into a thing called non-rector-centered parish. And it sounds good, but I didn't know what it meant. And some people said, well, what it means is we'll call you later. We call you when you want you. I'm like, no, the rector has authority, canonically, that I can't put down. There is no vehicle for me to say, I'm not going to pay attention to canon law. It just is not there. That's why the clergy follow liturgy as it is in the prayer book, versus like changing words that we don't like. Well, a liturgical commission hasn't given us permission to do that, so until it does, these are the words. Right? That's a particular of this set of clergy. This is, we believe in the foundational structures of the church. Now, we don't always agree with it. That's true. But we show up bringing a sense of, remember what we bring, humility and love. So, and to serve in that. It was interesting, I guess a year ago we sang the Lord's Prayer. I couldn't sing it, because, you know, this is Jeffrey's lane. Because Jeffrey does such a great job. And somebody came up and said, if we sing that again, I'm not going to pledge. And so I went to Mark, and I said, Mark, are we singing it? He goes, next Sunday. I went, okay. So, the transparency is good. So you're known for your cafe, amazing, your expansion into youth programming. We see a tremendous revitalization in young families. Yeah. It is unreal. And children and families keep having more than one children. Yeah. Yes. And I'm like, nobody tell them about birth control, because we're growing. You guys plan on using birth control? No. Great. No, Rome does that. But I'm kidding, of course, right? I mean, you got, it's a wonderful thing. Our academy has, it would be worth just to hear a presentation on what the academy does. From Kaleidoscope, with Carol and Randy giving a gift of Kaleidoscope to the church, to modifications in preschool and Christian education. It all functions as one. Monday through Friday, around 400 students come through this building. And it's all an academy structure. And it's just phenomenal to watch. Now, we always ask the question, what does teaching engineering to that child help do for Grace Church? We don't know, but it seems like a good idea. That's not true. I mean, what it does is it talks about the foundational footing of Grace's care and concern for the community. So it's really a wonderful thing. We've seen growth. Families, we now treat every family that comes through. Do you want to say something about that? Because I know I didn't do this either, but you're an academy parent and parishioner.
I see it all the time. I see people who are not parishioners who have kids enrolled in the school who then are drawn to the church in some other way.
Yeah. The thing that we find out is that most of them are or are not Episcopalian. What would you say? No. Not Episcopalian. Well, you don't have to say it with so much energy. You know you should be standing up. Down, 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 down. Up, up, up. Go, go, go. You can tell. Priests always like it when Episcopalians show up, because they're like, oh gosh, like with the sacrament, particularly chalice bearers. They're like, what do I do with that? Well, you can drink it, dip from it, you can, so they're not, but we're technical of what we do in terms of form and order. But people love you. Because remember what you bring. And they'll tolerate the up, down, right, left, kneel, to be loved. And a genius of the Episcopal Church, I said this to the bishop last week, is that we don't tell our story in effective ways, because you can come here and be loved and be divorced, be going through a divorce. You could come here and be struggling with human sexuality in terms of being conservative or liberal. We're going to love you. What do you bring with you into the process? It is vital to consider.
To me, the church is important. Clergy come and go. There is no way I would leave the church because of the clergy. No way.
I think that's a vital, important statement. It wounds my ego. I agree. But I will tell you, generationally, you represent a segment of the generation that's institutionally committed. If you look around, people aren't committed to institutions anymore. They're committed to what speaks to them. So historically, they would say, I'm going to come because I'm an Episcopalian or because it's my church. That doesn't exist anymore.
Well, it is in my case.
Yeah.
That's why I see you every Sunday at 7:15 for coffee. Right. So, but that's different generationally. I will tell you that when you do a great job, it becomes a part of your testimony. But remember what you pick up and what your posture is around it. And I will tell you that while Roger is correct in this wonderful sense of gratitude that people have for our presence of what Great Church is doing in its life, do you think should I read it or not read it? Or I'm going to read it.
Go ahead.
I mean, this is funny. But Jeffrey and I talked about it, and he didn't think it was funny, but and it wasn't about him. I mean, it's always funny what happens to the next person. That's the saying about.
I don't think it's funny.
Right. Well, you didn't either, Marge, but I do, because I don't know. This is transparency. This is from a clergy person in our deanery. Incidentally, in reference to your note, it's no surprise that there's no real interest in Evensong at Grace. I don't know who sent it. They were obviously dialoguing with this clergy person. They said that not enough people showed up at Evensong. If it was you, don't say anything. The new rector's. Now, what point am I not new anymore? Is what I went on.
10 years.
Is it 10 really? And then it's like, now you're out. The new rector's gimmick to attract people is hiring a parish executive chef and opening Grace Cafe. Either for eating in their designer-decorated parish hall.
Wow.
Compliment. Or taking home a gourmet dinner when they've had a long day at either Neiman Marcus or the country club. I mean, that makes me laugh. Then he cites Matthew Dahlman about having theology degrees, saying that's why Jesus died on the cross, so Grace Church can have an executive chef. I'm thinking, yeah, Jesus died for us all. What do you want for breakfast? That rector knows what's really important to those social climbing, very common middle-class, snob, secular, materialist parishioners. People wonder why the Episcopal Church is imploding. Isn't that awesome?
Did they sign their name?
Oh yeah, yeah, you do too.
Well, I think it's.
So anyway, and I don't, the impulse shouldn't be, well, I'm going to go storm the hill, because I don't bring a lightsaber to the cave. It's to pray and to love and to have gratitude, and I said to Marge in talking about it, and Rolf, and to also sit down and say what is true about it. what is being said beyond the poison that might be true, because our attendance for Evensong was low. And financial opportunities afford lots of choices. We experience that a lot in our programming. So, you know, the question becomes to each of us, what will you carry and what will you bring? Not only in your life here at Grace Church, but in your own spiritual life. What will you pick up? And the importance of that is pick up the right things. And I'll tell you this, I have no anxiety about my job here at all. Which really did a back end on that whole thing, right? Well, it's time for you to go. Well, it's a little early, but okay. Wait a minute, you're not stressed out about that? Not really. And so to not pick up things that make you anxious. Either singing one song, doing one thing, it's all pointers. And letting the inconvenience open you up more for being aware for how the Spirit's moving in your life. I can go on about programming the great things from Santa Elena, amazing stuff. You guys are going today, aren't you? That's huge. You're going to church twice? Oh, you're skipping me. Oh, no, I'm kidding.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
Putting yourself vulnerable.
vulnerability. Showing up without any idea of what's going to happen. Without any guarantee to show up. Okay. I've spoke so long you don't have questions, which was my strategy.
Maybe you'd like a glass of water.
This glass is definitely empty now. I hope, my hope and my desire, the deans asked me a question around the table because we were talking about stewardship and how well we do here, how well we're doing. And the transparency we practice around it, they were shocked, actually a little excited about it, and it with some negative energy. Yeah, God bless. They said, what excites you? Asking me that. Well, what excites me is you. When you pick up things that help you grow. What distresses me a little is when you pick up things that hurt you. That's distressing. Not because it hurts my ego, because I can see that you've invited some level of suffering in your life that's not necessary. Suffering's optional. Pain is not. So thank you for being a part and letting us be a part of all of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.